Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, and today I want to delve a little deeper into the complex world of artificial intelligence. Yes, everyone says it's the future, but it cannot actually solve that age-old problem of garbage in, garbage out. And to solve that one, you're going to need to make sure your data is in good shape. But where does a business go when they have a problem like this? And who they're going to call? No, not Ghostbusters, man. Some of you just can't help yourself. But like Kane in the Kung Fu TV series, I'm on a quest to discover understanding and maybe get into a few adventures along the way. But today, my search led me to Alegion, which is an Austin-based technology company. And they provide an AI training data platform and services that span the AI lifecycle, integrating human intelligence into the creation of high-quality training data, model scoring and validation, and exception handling. So essentially, the Alegion platform helps enterprises accelerate confidence in their AI initiatives and mitigate their risk, all by using proven approaches. But why is this a big deal, you might say? Well, through to 2022, 85% of AI projects are expected to deliver erroneous outcomes due to bias in data. And if you get over the bias problem, you've got algorithms or the teams responsible for managing them. And these aren't my words, this is all according to research firm Gartner. And many of these errors can be attributed to problems with AI training data. And to get AI systems off the ground, training data actually needs to be trustworthy and high quality, requiring labelling, clarification, cleanup and normalisation. Otherwise, it's not going to be usable in enterprise AI development. But the big question for business leaders, of course, is, well, how do I actually get there? Well, buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Austin, Texas, so we can speak with Nathaniel Gates, CEO and co-founder of Alegion, who's going to tell us how Alegion is accelerating enterprise AI initiatives by validating, labelling and training data at any scale, but at guaranteed quality. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Nathaniel. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Nathaniel Gates, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company headquartered in Austin, Texas, called Alegion. And Alegion is in the AI space. We help companies create and train algorithmic models for supervised learning. We help companies test the models that they have against validated data sets or real-time validation. And then we also help with real-time exception handling. So if in production a real-time model kicks out something that's too low of confidence, we can actually have a human interact with that. And that's kind of the heart of what our application is. We're able to distribute work both to AI-based judgment as well as human-based and human intelligence-based judgment, and bring those two efforts together for the value for the customer. So that's kind of what we do. We're here in Austin, Texas, and we have a group also in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, who does a lot of our human side of things as well. So.
Now, before we talk about Alegion, I wanted to try and explore a few of the problems that are out there at the moment. I mean, for example, according to Gartner, I think through to 2022, 85% of AI projects are expected to deliver erroneous outcomes due to bias inside the data. Algorithms or the teams responsible for managing them, and most of all these errors can be attributed to problems with AI training data. And to get AI systems off the ground, training data needs to be trustworthy and high quality right from the beginning. And of course that requires labelling, classifications, cleanup and normalisation, all to be usable in an enterprise AI development. But can you set the scene a little and tell the listeners this very real struggle that businesses are having both now and they're going to encounter in the future too, to get to this AI promised land that they're repeatedly told is the future?
Sure. Yeah, the AI promised land is out there, but there are many valleys and peaks that these organizations are going to have to weather in order to get to where they're hoping to end up. And we see it all. We see the immaturity of the marketplace itself and how addressing artificial intelligence, how they're chasing machine learning as a value proposition. And we see companies that are very mature, and we see companies that are very immature. And we can give you examples of those types of approaches. But more often than not, because our focus is on enterprise, we see very large companies that are taking decidedly immature routes towards machine learning. Oftentimes, we're dealing with small data science teams within those large organizations that are trying to solve just one specific problem. And this is very common where we'll see a lot of fracturing within the enterprise, where they have multiple competing data science teams utilizing the same source data, trying to solve many different problems. And there's very little interaction between those data science teams, and you might find that surprising. But what we see these data science teams do is just throw a lot of things against the wall and see what sticks. They might be trying to solve a problem, and so they have an idea how an algorithm could use their source data to infer a potential solution. So they test it in a very limited scope, and then they measure what the value of that output was, and then they either discard it or they move forward. And oftentimes the baby is thrown out with the bathwater, where they found the algorithm, or they found the inference to be beneath the accuracy or confidence level that they required for an ROI or for a production value. But really they measured it incorrectly. And to your point, there's many different ways that bias could have creeped in there to poison the well to some extent, where there would have been no capacity for value out of that project because the prerequisites that or steps that they skipped along the way to ensure that it was trained correctly. So I'm happy to jump into an example or two of that if that would help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking from a business leader point of view, anyone listening there, if you could tell me more about how you believe the data set preparation and what that should actually look like so people can have an idea of what to look out for.
Well, the biggest advantage that these big companies have is that they have the source data. They have the data in which to train with, right? And that's their largest advantage from being disrupted, being caught from behind by an up-and-coming startup that is targeting that one value proposition within their industry. So these CIOs and CDOs know that they have the strongest advantage because they hold the data. The concern and the trick then is how can they then use that data to train their algorithms and their models to the point where they have a competitive advantage. What we see companies tripping over is that they try to train very quickly and be able to measure very quickly the value of that outcome. So they take a very limited data set, and then they measure the results from that very limited data set, and they either, again, see that it achieved value or it did not, and then they move on. The problem is the vast majority of the value in training comes with scale. So very early on, with a small amount of training, you're able to get your model up to a point of confidence. So let's say it's a chatbot, and you are using all of the customer service interactions that you've had in your business for the last few years as source data. And you take a sampling of that and you train it for just maybe the top 4 or 5 types of inbound inquiries that customer service faces. Well, if you're able to train to those 4 or 5, then very quickly you can get the model confidence on a chatbot being able to come up with, what the customer service requirement is pretty quickly. But the problem is the real value, the hundreds and hundreds of customer service inquiries that are outside of those 4 main channels, right? In order to train all of those takes a huge amount of data, and it takes a huge amount of data training. So it really is kind of the concepts of boulders, rocks, and pebbles, where the boulders are very easy to train for and see the value out of that. But the models don't really achieve ROI or market dominance until you start training at the rocks and pebbles level. And that amount of training generally surprises these data science organizations, where they feel like they weren't even close to the amount and the commitment of investment and training necessary to dominate that specific value proposition. So we see these existing organizations greatly underscope the amount of training necessary for number one, just to prove the value proposition of the model, but then number two, seeing ROI and seeing dominance within that space takes such a tremendous commitment and investment in training and ongoing training that we see a lot of immaturity there and just understanding what the level of commitment is like.
And this is where we come to Alegion, because Alegion's managed service accelerates enterprise AI initiatives by validating, labeling and annotating training data at any scale at guaranteed quality. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you help improve assembly lines and how organizations can actually be AI ready?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, think of it as an assembly line is a great analogy. But there's a giant bottleneck in the assembly line. That's the data science team in themselves. But more often than not, the data science teams are the ones spending the nights and weekends doing the annotation and labeling, applying the structure to their data that needs to be there in order to train their models. But they're only, a team of 6 maybe, and they can only address so much data. And they're also very, very expensive data labelers, as you can imagine, right? Yeah. Or maybe they have a small team of interns or a team offshore that they're able to use. But never in their wildest dreams did they understand that they would have to train at scales of 100x what they're currently addressing, or 1,000x in order to demonstrate the value of their model. So what Alegion does is we come alongside and we supercharge their assembly line. So the data coming out of their data stores that they have can be ingested at any scale, distributed to thousands of people concurrently, and delivered back into their model with an expectation of very high quality at whatever quality level the customer requires. Maybe they're trying to do some sort of model around healthcare or radiology or self-driving vehicles where the tolerance for error is 0. That means that the data that they train their models with has to be extremely high quality. There's no tolerance for poor confidence. In those types of situations, the amount of data that would need to be addressed, scored, labeled, and then fed into the application has a very high level of accuracy requirement and a very high quantity of volume. So that's where Alegion can really help supercharge those assembly lines.
And for people listening all over the world, what is it you think that makes Alegion unique when compared to all those other AI as a service and data as a service providers that seem to be cropping up now? What is it that makes you guys stand out, do you think?
Yeah, I think what we have the biggest value is that we are actually a software platform that can integrate with whatever your internal data sources are and your downstream models. We're not trying to build your models. We're not trying to create AI for you. We just do the data manipulation necessary in order for your internal models to be successful. And that's our services and our software. The other big differentiator that Alegion has is that we don't just depend on humans for doing the labeling and annotation. Yes, humans are a very important part of that, and humans, give us that ground truth human perspective that we strive for when building ML models. But at the scale necessary for our customers to train at the levels that they require, it becomes financially, impossible to train at that level if you're paying humans the entire way. So Alegion differentiates itself by creating machine learning models for training right within our own platform. So not only are we using humans to train, but we are training our own machines to train. We really see the future of AI being dependent upon other AI training it. And that might be hard to ingest or hear, but because of the volume of edge cases and corner cases, those grains of sand in my boulder, rocks, and pebbles analogy, the only way to keep up with the volume of continuous training is being able to leverage other AI to help train and fill in the gaps. And so Alegion doesn't just bring humans to the table to train, but we train algorithms, and then the algorithms themselves do the bulk of the training over time, the continuous improvement on the tireless striving to 100% that these models are trying to get to. It has to be handed off. That baton has to be handed off from humans to AI, and that's what Alegion does. So Alegion provides the artificial and the human intelligence necessary within that automation pipeline to move those models continuously and forever closer and closer to 100%.
Now, after 800 interviews on this Daily Tech podcast, I'm conscious that there is always a story behind every tech company. So I've got to ask, how did you start out in this space, and what was the inspiration behind Alegion?
Yeah. I'd love to tell you some fantastic foresight on my part, where I could just see over the horizon of the next coming age. But really, we had been involved in crowdsourcing for some time, working with organizations like Amazon and their Mechanical Turk team, and helping companies utilize remote workers for business automation. And we saw a natural kind of change in the marketplace where a striking number of inbound opportunities had nothing to do with business automation. They needed to create these supervised training data sets. And so we're like, okay, first, we went to Wikipedia to look up what that actually means, and it's like, holy cow, we just happen to be very, very good at this, right? We had the ability to create very high quality data from remote workers at high scale. So then the question was, all right, how do we create that as an opportunity specifically around artificial intelligence if that's where the market is going? And that's what led us down the path of hiring our own chief data scientist and building out our research teams in R&D and actually becoming quite a very knowledgeable player in the space around artificial intelligence by being able to train all of these data models for our enterprise customers. We see such a broad array of use cases across multiple industries and sectors that we've become quite good at being able to identify value propositions given the data that we have and what our customers' pain is and what we're trying to pursue. So I would say that our roots came from crowdsourcing, being able to have remote workers do work through software. But we pivoted over to artificial intelligence and ML training because we saw that's where the market was going. And we saw that there was a huge value proposition for being able to bring large remote workforces to bear against these problems.
Now, for every business leader listening, it often feels like every sales rep that turns up in the business reception, along with those trade shows, conferences, and even cold callers, are all delivering the same message. And their sales pitch typically begins with that AI is going to transform their business and it's the future. But how do you actually see this playing out, and what are the biggest challenges and also the opportunities for businesses ahead?
Today, it's a question of opportunity. Tomorrow, it will definitely be a question of necessity. I was recently speaking in a conference where I said that the impact of artificial intelligence will be greater than the impact of the internet within our own generation. And I asked for a show of hands of the people in the audience whose job was dependent or at least partially dependent upon the internet in terms of their actual role in terms of whether it's distribution or whether it's their actual occupation. And 90% of the hands in that conference were raised, right? Yeah. Artificial intelligence, very similar to the internet age, will spawn an entire new, mechanism for job creation, right? And that's one of the things that we're doing at Alegion. These jobs of data annotators and model validators and exception handlers didn't exist just 3 years ago, and now we're hiring them by the thousands. There are huge new capacities for employment that are happening right now. And that's because artificial intelligence will touch every facet of every business within the next 5 years. Whether it's manufacturing or financial services or healthcare, every facet of these industries will be touched to some extent by artificial intelligence. Everywhere where there's presently human judgment being used to interpret and make decisions will have, at the very least, the ability to be augmented through artificial intelligence and then downstream potentially replaced through artificial intelligence. So today there is an opportunity to lead a specific sector or industry by pioneering that solution within artificial intelligence. Tomorrow it will be an absolute imperative. And if you have not integrated artificial intelligence, then you will be behind and unable to catch up. It's to some extent where you see how difficult it was for Siri to catch up with Google Assistant just being a couple years late, or Apple Maps being so difficult to catch up with Google Maps. because the amount of data that they were able to ingest, train, and train their models became insurmountable to catch up. You might have seen Elon Musk was just speaking about this the other day. The ability for other self-driving companies to catch Tesla at this point, because the volume of trained data that they already have becomes an obstacle for competition. And if these business leaders right now are not considering how artificial intelligence is going to disrupt their industry, or if they feel like their industry is protected because of risk concerns and things like that, then it might already be too late. And there's somebody who is planning on how to do it already, if that makes sense.
It really does. A very powerful message. And you are attending a lot of conferences this year and talking about training data and why scale is critical to your AI future. But for anyone listening that won't get a chance to see you on the road this year, are there any other key messages that you're driving to people that drop by your booths at events that you could maybe pass on to people listening?
Yeah, the key messages that we would probably be saying is don't look at your data science projects as individual silos within your organization. Consider a broad service offered through the CDO department or a data group that can provide training data across all the data science teams. That's where we're seeing our most mature enterprises see that the centralization of the investment and the distribution of training data across all of their data science initiatives is one of the foundations of what we'll call ML ops, which we believe is the next version of DevOps. All of the various capabilities that surround development that became DevOps, we see forming this concept of ML ops. And the necessity to centralize the mechanisms and the applications that surround machine learning within an organization. And so our most mature customers, basically identify that this is the mechanism we're going to use for training, and then they distribute that training data across all of their different machine learning initiatives. And we see a lot of value in that, and our customers that have done that see that as well.
I think we've left everyone listening with a lot of questions or how it will impact their world and their business. So for anybody that is left with more questions after listening to our conversation, what is the best way for them to find you guys online and also maybe reach out and contact a member of your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're obviously have a website at alegion.com. That's like a legion, like a legion of people, alegion.com, and you can find us there. We have a form on that says, tell us about your project. Oftentimes we just end up with roundtable discussions where we can just talk about what your project is and what your pain has been to date. Has it been a pain around confidence in the project? Has it been a pain around performance of the algorithm? We can talk about all the different, we have a great white paper that talks about the 4 different ways bias can creep into your model and erode confidence. We're happy to have those initial calls and say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Then if training data is found to be the deficit in the model, then that's something we can jump on and pursue. But oftentimes it might not be training data. It might be underlying algorithm assumptions that are the problem, or bias in the sample data to begin with that was chosen, and that's stuff we can help you guys think through before jumping into a commitment with an application. We're happy to do that.
Well, I love your approach to complex technology and how Alegion accelerates enterprise AI initiatives by just validating, labeling, and at scale at guaranteed quality. But as complex as that is, what I love about it most is it all begins with you just saying, just tell us about your project, and then starting from there. I think it's fantastic what you're doing. But more than anything, just a big thank you for coming on the show today and sharing that story with me. Thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Wow, such a complex topic, but an incredibly important one at the same time. AI might be the future, but discussing what a dataset preparation should look like and how organisations can be AI ready, that is the valuable stuff that we don't talk about enough. So I hope you found today's conversation valuable, but I'd love to hear about your challenges, your opportunities, successes and failures with AI too. Because we're going to have listeners all over the world going through the exact same problems and the exact same scenarios. And maybe, just maybe, if we join forces and share stories, maybe we can help each other out and prevent us from making the same mistake. So how does that sound? Good. Well, email me techblogwriter@outlook.com or get me on Twitter @NeilCHughes. And my website, of course, is techblogwriter.co.uk. If we can have just one company or one individual and help them from making the same mistake that you have, then that can only be a great thing. So keep those insights coming my way, and I'll be the connector guy that makes sure everyone gets the right message. But that's it for me today. So let's break for snacks and come back tomorrow. Podcast class dismissed. And I'll see you all again tomorrow, bright and early. But a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.